Hello everyone, I am Iris Policarpio, and at this time I will discuss about the readings in Philippine History chapter 11, which are the address of the Philippines by General Masaharu Homa and inaugural address by President Jose P. Laurel. Address to the People of the Philippines by General Masaharu Homa. Lieutenant General Masaharu Homa gave a speech to the people of the Philippines during World War II after Japan invaded the country. In his address, he tried to justify Japan's actions, claiming that the Japanese military was in the Philippines to bring peace and prosperity. He emphasized that the Philippines would benefit from Japanese rule and urged the people to cooperate with the Japanese forces. Huma's speech was meant to persuade Filipinos to accept Japanese occupation, though many Filipinos resisted. First, let's get to know who was General Masaharu Homa. So he was the commander of the Japanese 14th Army during World War II. He played a key role in the invasion of the Philippines in 1941 and 1942. Under his leadership, the Japanese forces successfully captured the Philippines' important locations, including Bataan and Corregidor. However, Huma's name became linked to the Bataan Death March, a tragic event in which thousands of Filipino and American soldiers were forced to march to prison camps under brutal conditions, leading to many deaths. After the war, Homa was held responsible for these war crimes. He was also put on trial in Manila and found guilty of his actions. In 1946, General Homa was executed by firing squad for his role in the suffering and deaths of many during the war. So, Lieutenant General Masaharu Homa, the commander of the Japanese forces in the Philippines during World War II, gave a speech to the Filipino people. In his address, he explained his vision for the Philippines under Japanese rule. Homa claimed that Japan was in the Philippines to bring peace, order, and prosperity. He promised that the Filipino people would benefit from Japanese control and that they would live better lives. He urged Filipinos to accept Japanese occupation and cooperate with the Japanese forces. Homa tried to convince the people that Japan's presence was for their own good. However, many Filipinos did not trust him and resisted Japanese occupation. Despite his promises, the occupation brought suffering to many and the Filipinos continued to fight for their freedom. Homa's speech was part of Japan's attempt to gain support, but it failed to win the trust of most Filipinos. Now let's focus on the important aspects of General Masaharu Homa. So in his address, General Masaharu Homa focused on the idea of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, which was a plan led by Japan to create an economic and political alliance among Asian countries. Homa believed this new system would free Asian nations, including the Philippines, from Western power like the United States. He promised that under Japanese rule, Filipinos would live a prosperity and be free from American influence. Homa encouraged Filipinos to adopt a resilient and constructive spirit, which meant they should work hard and be united for a better future. He also urged them to stop being obsessed with Americanism and instead embrace a new sense of Asian unity and independence. Huma's message was meant to persuade Filipinos to support Japan's control, but many still resisted. as they wanted to keep their independence and freedom. In his speech, General Masaharu Humma aimed to lay the spiritual foundation for a new Philippines under Japanese rule. He presented Japan as the spiritual support for the Philippines and other Asian nations, claiming that Japan would guide them to a better and brighter future. Homa emphasized that the Philippines would be part of the greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, a group of nations united under Japan's leadership. He promised that this new system would bring prosperity and peace to the region. However, Huma's speech did not mention the harsh realities of Japanese occupation, such as the violence and cruelty committed by the Japanese military. He failed to acknowledge the suffering caused by the Japanese forces, including atrocities like the Bataan Death March. Many Filipinos who were experiencing these hardships rejected his message of a brighter future under Japan. General Homa's address was meant to win the support of the Filipino people and make them accept Japanese rule. However, his speech did not succeed in convincing the Filipinos. The harsh actions of the Japanese army, like the brutal Bataan Death March, caused many Filipinos to distrust and oppose Japan. The Bataan Death March, where thousands of Filipino and American soldiers were forced to march under terrible conditions, was especially painful and led to widespread anger. Instead of gaining support, Huma's address only fueled resistance against the Japanese occupation. After the war, Huma was put on trial for war crimes, including his role in the atrocities in the Philippines. He was found guilty and executed by firing squad in 1946. His failed attempt to win the hearts of the Filipino people became part of his tragic legacy. In conclusion, General Masaharu Huma's speech to the Filipino people presented an idea of a new Philippines under Japanese control as part of the greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. He promised prosperity and freedom from Western influence, claiming Japan would lead the Philippines to a better future. However, Huma's speech ignored the harsh realities of Japanese occupation, such as the violence and suffering caused by the Japanese army. Filipinos who were living through these hardships cannot accept his vision. Instead of gaining their support, Huma's address only increased their resistance to Japanese rule. His failure to understand the pain and anger of the Filipino people made his speech ineffective. In the end, his attempt to win over the Filipinos was unsuccessful. Inaugural address by President Jose P. Laurel. President Jose P. Laurel's inaugural address was given when he became the President of the Philippines in 1943, during the Japanese occupation in World War II. In his speech, he expressed his commitment to leading the country through difficult times and rebuilding the nation. Laurel called for unity among Filipinos and emphasized the importance of independence and self-governance. He also acknowledged the need to work with Japan, which was in control of the Philippines at the time, but hoped for a brighter future for the Filipino people. Now, let's get to know about President Jose P. Laurel and what's his address all about. So, Jose Paciano Laurel E. Garcia was the president of the Philippines during its Japanese occupation from 1943 to 1945. He led the Second Philippine Republic, which was set up under Japanese supervision during World War II. Laurel's presidency is controversial because he was accused of collaborating with the Japanese forces as the Philippines was under Japanese control at that time. After the war, he was charged with treason but was later cleared of these charges. Despite the controversy, Laurel re-entered politics after the war and continued to advocate for Filipino unity and independence. He was seen by some as a leader who tried to protect the interests of the Philippines during a difficult period, but by others as someone who worked too closely with the Japanese. His legacy remains mixed, with some remembering his efforts for peace while others criticize his rule during the occupation. Now let's focus on the important aspects of President Laurel's address. So, in his inaugural address, President Jose P. Laurel celebrated what he described as the Philippines' newfound freedom from American rule. He believed that this freedom was part of a larger movement to liberate Asian countries from Western powers. Laurel acknowledged the sacrifices made by Filipino heroes who fought for independence and freedom. He also expressed gratitude to the Japanese emperor, thanking him for what Laurel called the Holy War that led to the Philippines' independence. According to Laurel, Japan's rule in the war helped speed up the Philippines' path to self-rule. However, this view was controversial as the country was still under Japanese occupation at that time. Laurel's address tried to present a situation in a positive light, but many Filipinos saw it differently as they were suffering under Japanese control. Despite his words of independence, the reality of Japanese occupation made his speech a complex and debated moment in Philippine history. Now let's focus on the important aspects of President Laurel's address. So, in his inaugural address, President Jose P. Laurel celebrated what he described as the Philippines' newfound freedom from American rule. He believed that this freedom was part of a larger movement to liberate Asian countries from Western powers. Laurel acknowledged the sacrifices made by Filipino heroes who fought for independence and freedom. He also expressed gratitude to the Japanese emperor, thanking him for what Laurel called the Holy War that led to the Philippines' independence. According to Laurel, Japan's rule in the war helped speed up the Philippines' path to self-rule. However, this view was controversial as the country was still under Japanese occupation at that time. Laurel's address tried to present a situation in a positive light, but many Filipinos saw it differently as they were suffering under Japanese control. Despite his words of independence, the reality of Japanese occupation made his speech a complex and debated moment in Philippine history. President Jose P. Laurel shared his vision for the future of the Philippines. He called for peace and order, believing that a stable country was essential for progress. Laurel also emphasized the importance of economic self-sufficiency, hoping that the Philippines could become independent in terms of food, resources, and industry. He urged former guerrilla fighters to stop resisting and join efforts to build the nation. Laurel believed that agriculture, heavy industry, and careful economic planning were key to achieving this self-sufficiency and prosperity. He also wanted to create a strong, independent Philippines that could stand on its own. His vision focused on improving the country's economy and helping Filipinos live better lives. However, the reality of Japanese occupation made it difficult to fully achieve these goals. In conclusion, President Jose P. Laurel's inaugural address presented a vision of a new independent Philippines, free from American control and part of Japan's greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. He promised peace, order, and economic growth for the country. However, his speech was given during a time when the Philippines was under harsh Japanese occupation, and the reality of Japanese control made his words difficult for many to accept. While Laurel spoke of independence and unity, his government was seen by many as a puppet of Japan, naturally independent. The legitimacy of his leadership and the decisions he made during the occupation remain subjects of debate among historians. Some argue that he tried to protect the Philippines in a difficult situation, while others criticize his cooperation with the Japanese. His legacy is complex and continues to be discussed and analyzed today.